Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I, along with the Prime Minister, absolutely condemn the vile messages and threatening packages that have been sent to Muslim members of this House, and also the rise in Islamophobia and the abusive messages that are being sent to Muslim families all over this country. It has to be utterly condemned by all of us, as we condemn anybody that attempts to divide our country by racism or by extremism in any form. I think we just have to stand united with any community that's under threat at any time. Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the whole House would join me in supporting what the Prime Minister just said about Stephen Hawking, one of the most acclaimed scientists of his generation, helped us to understand about the world and the universe, was also concerned about peace and the survival of the world, but is also a passionate campaigner for the National Health Service. And he said, "I have received excellent medical attention in Britain. I believe in universal health care, and I'm not afraid to say so." Mr. Speaker, if we believe in universal health care, how can it be possible that someone lives and works in this country, pays their taxes, but is then denied access to the NHS for life-saving cancer treatment? Can the Prime Minister explain?
Prime Minister.
First of all, join with the right honourable gentleman in saying there is absolutely no place in our society for hate crime or racism, whatever form it takes. We should stand united against such behaviour and such activities. And can I say to the right honourable gentleman that we do ensure, and I'm pleased that we have a good record on the cancer provision that we're making. We now see more people surviving cancer in this country as a result of changes that have been made, developments that have come in the National Health Service than ever before. Of course, we continue to work to ensure that the situation that we're putting, that the treatments that we're making available are the best treatments that we can. I'm not aware of the particular case that the right honourable gentleman has raised with me, but we do want to ensure that all those who are entitled to service with the treatment through the National Health Service are able to achieve it. There are, of course, questions around particular drugs that are made available to individuals for treatment, which, of course, we continue to look at.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, I would indeed be writing to the Prime Minister about the case I'm concerned about. It's a man who's lived in this country for 44 years, worked and paid his taxes, obviously is an older gentleman, and is now being denied cancer treatment. And I suspect he's not alone in this, and I urge her to discuss this with the Home Office and others. Mr. Speaker, I received a letter from Hillary this week, a British pensioner, and this goes to the point the Prime Minister just said, and she says, "I am now having to pay for my thyroid medication because the CCG needs to save money. I've worked all my life, paid national insurance, and this is not fair." Last March, the Health Secretary said it's absolutely essential that we get back to the 95% target for accident and emergency waits. And he said it should happen, and I quote, "in the course of the next calendar year." Well, the calendar year is now up. Can the Prime Minister explain why this is no longer possible?
Prime Minister.
Well, first of all, on the individual case, I look forward to receiving the details from the right honourable gentleman. May I just, though, take this opportunity of reminding him that I think he raised a case about Georgina with me last October and hasn't written to me about that particular case. So, as I say, I look forward to receiving the details of the case that he has just set out. What we have done in relation to cancer treatment is ensure there are more diagnostic tests taking place. We see more people being seen by a specialist for suspected cancer and more people starting treatment for cancer. That's why I say that we have seen an improvement in the cancer treatment that is available to people in this country. And in relation to accident and emergency, I'm pleased to say that we do have more doctors doctors working in accident and emergency. We have put more money in, the Chancellor announced this last year, both for winter pressures and to ensure that accident and emergency departments are able to provide the treatment that is right for the patient before them. Because for some people, actually, they don't need to be in an accident admitted to hospital. They need to be seeing a GP. We're working with the NHS to ensure that the treatment that patients receive is the treatment that is right for them.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, my understanding is Georgina's case was resolved before the Prime Minister was needed to do anything about it. Following my raising it here. Well, it proves that, well, if nothing else, Mr. Speaker, it proves the power of Parliament. Mr. Speaker, key A&E waiting targets have not been met since 2015. NHS managers are saying they won't be met till 2019, and February was the worst ever month for accident and emergency performances. NHS Providers Director Saffron Cordery said, "This is the first time we've had to accept the NHS will not meet its key constitutional standards. If we want to provide quality of care, we need the right long-term financial settlement." The NHS is clearly in crisis. So why wasn't there a penny extra for the NHS in yesterday's statement by the Chancellor?
Prime Minister.
Can I say to the right honourable gentleman, we didn't wait until yesterday's spring statement to announce more money for the NHS. We announced it in the budget last autumn. And as a result of that, the NHS is getting £2.5 billion more in the forthcoming financial year 18-19 and more to fund the nurses' pay settlement when that is resolved.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, under Labour, the 18-week target for non-urgent operations was in place. The target has also been abandoned by the Prime Minister. When will that be reinstated?
Prime Minister.
Well, the right honourable gentleman talks about under Labour things that were being delivered. Perhaps he might look to see what Labour are doing in Wales in their delivery on the latest annual data. The latest annual data shows, when we're looking at 12-hour waits in A&E, that 3.4% of patients waited over 12 hours in Wales compared to 1.3% in England. If he wants to talk about meeting targets, he should talk to the Labour government in Wales.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, NHS England abandoned its A&E targets until April 2019. It's a bit rich for the Prime Minister to be scaremongering about Wales while she's abandoned the targets in England. Mr. Speaker, a recent...
Order. Lots of questions to get through and they must be heard. Jeremy Corbyn.
A recent NAO report states that NHS funding will fall by 0.3% in 2019. People's lives are at stake. Is the Prime Minister really saying A&E doctors are wrong, NHS managers are wrong, Royal Colleges are wrong, health unions are wrong, and actually it's only she that knows best about the NHS?
Prime Minister.
Can I just point out to the right honourable gentleman, he talks about scaremongering in Wales, and I was pointing out the facts about what is happening in the NHS in Wales. And that's why we do see that's why we do see people in Wales often trying actually to get treatment in England rather than in Wales. But can I also say to the right honourable gentleman, we are putting more money into the National Health Service. We are putting more money into the National Health Service. But what you need in order to be able to do that is to ensure that you have a strong economy to provide the money for the National Health Service. What do we know about the Labour's policies? It would cause a run on the pound, crash our economy, bankrupt Britain, and there'd be less money for the NHS.
Jeremy Corbyn.
When people are dying because of overcrowding and long waits in our hospitals, I think the Prime Minister should get a grip on it and ensure the NHS now has the money that it needs to deal with the patient demands. In a recent interview, the Health Secretary said of NHS staff, when they signed up to go into medicine, they knew there would be pressurised moments. What they also expected was a recognition, an annual pay rise without cuts in paid leave, proper funding for the National Health Service. And when there are 100,000 unfilled posts, clearly not enough staff around them to share the burden. We started with Professor Stephen Hawking, and he said just a few months ago, there is overwhelming evidence that NHS funding and the number of doctors and nurses are inadequate, and it's getting worse. Does she agree with Professor Hawking?
Prime Minister.
Once again, I'm very happy to point out some facts to the right honourable gentleman. We have 14,900 more doctors working in the National Health Service. We have almost 13,900 more nurses working on our wards. Why did we put an emphasis on nurses working in our wards? Because of what we saw under the Labour government in mid-Staffordshire. And I just say to the right honourable gentleman this, that what we need to do to ensure that we can provide the funding for the NHS, and we are providing record levels of funding for the NHS, is to ensure that we take a balanced approach to our economy. That's an approach to our economy that deals with our debts, keeps taxes low on working families, and puts more money into our public services like hospitals and schools. Labour's approach would increase the debt. Labour's approach would mean less money for our schools and hospitals, and it would mean higher taxes for ordinary working people, because what we know about the Labour Party is it's always ordinary people who pay the price of Labour.